I am trying a brand new setup today. I got the easel right here. I got my Instagram here, Facebook right there. What I want to talk to you today about was to say no to shame, okay? So often in our lives, we hear these words. People say to us, they're like, shame on you for doing X, Y, Z. Shame on you. And shame is ingrained in our culture. When somebody does something that we don't like, we say shame on them. And we take on shame when we make mistakes in our lives, when we do things that we know maybe was not the best thing for us. And then that shame creates fear of either being exposed, doing it again, and we start to control our lives to not feel that shame, so we never do again the thing that is even close to what created that shame. Here's the deal. You have to say no to shame. Shame does not help you. And for you to go after what you're called to do, you have to completely eliminate all shame from your life. In fact, I am inviting you to be shameless, completely shameless, not allowing anybody's opinions, ideas, what you should do or shouldn't do, or guilt dictate what you're going to do. And a more powerful thing than shame is identity and choice. See, when we have shame, we aren't clear about our identity, who we are, what we were made to do. And so our guilt and our shame influences us to do certain things that we should do, influences us to go to the gym, for instance, to eat better, to help another person, to volunteer, to not talk back to our parents, for instance. When you're younger, you have this shame that comes in when you do that. When you're older, maybe you spoke up in a meeting and you were shot down. So now you feel shamed by that. When you're older, you approached something, you did something that you felt inside of you were supposed to do, and it didn't quite work out how you wanted to. So then you made a decision, I'm not going to do that again. You touched the hot stove too much. And the reason that happens is this: you got a glimpse of your identity. You got a glimpse of the truth of who you are, who you were created to be, and you stepped out. You stepped into that for a tiny moment without wisdom. And when you try to walk in your identity without wisdom, things happen that can cause shame, okay? But when you realize the truth is this: your purpose, what you were made for, what you were called to do, your destiny, where you're going, and you're clear about your identity, you're clear about the beliefs about your life, what God says, why you were created, what you were made for, shame has no place to influence you. Shame has no possibility of making you afraid of doing it again. And when you are afraid of what other people will think or afraid of how you will be perceived, you will make yourself small, you will shrink small, and you will never go where you want to be. And how do I know this? Because I've done this my whole life, okay? I've done this my entire life, been afraid of how people would perceive me if I stepped out, if I did what I was called to do. In fact, I was afraid of even getting up and doing this video today because I was like, look, I got a Star Wars shirt on. People are going to be like, how am I going to take this guy seriously? You know what? I'm not going to let that shame affect me. I'm going to speak up. And so what I want to encourage you with today is this: for you to go after what you're called to do, you have to say no to shame. You have to say no to guilt. You have to say no to the things that the enemy has used to mess with your head and twist and distort and pervert your identity. You have had a perverted identity is what it is. It got twisted into the shame identity, the fear, and then you controlled it. You literally took it, and this is your identity. You got shamed and you went like this. And now this is what you're trying to use to accomplish everything that you're called to do. Okay? But what's more powerful than that is this: truth. The truth about who you are, what you were made for, what you were called to do, and then combating the lie of your identity from the experiential truth with the truth about what God says about you, why you were created, your purpose, and then making a choice. a choice to do what you're supposed to do, what you're called to do, what you were made for. And so here's the deal. Shame influences us. Gym guilt is a big one that a lot of people have. And let me use that as an example. You have shame of how your body looks, how other people perceive you. And so you go to the gym out of shame. You eat right out of shame. You don't speak up out of shame. Because your identity, you're trying to fit your identity into a box of what other people said that you should be, not based on who you were really called to be, okay? And so your identity becomes that thing, that this shame filter. When you eliminate shame and you get clear on that, now you're like, well, how am I going to be motivated to do anything? How am I going to get up in the morning and be motivated to build my business, to go to the gym? And that's where the power of choice comes in. Choice is choosing to do it because, not because they said, not because I should, but because this is what I want to do. And so identity and choice work hand in hand. They go together. When you're clear on your identity and your belief systems about yourself, now you can make a choice to do what will serve you, what will help you move towards your goals, walk out your calling, not because you're afraid of doing it wrong, but because you know that this is what I'm called to do and I am choosing, not because I should, but because this is my calling and my desire and my identity. It's not based on, I shouldn't do it this way. It's not based on, well, I shouldn't speak up. It's, I'm speaking up because I am choosing to do so, period. And that's what a lot of people don't get. They don't get that choice ends at the choice. You make a decision and you choose and then you take action. When you combine wisdom with identity and choice and action, so you got decisions, identity, choice, wisdom, and action. This is like just getting all discombobulated here. Decisions. When you got decisions, you know your identity, you have decisions, so then you're making a choice with wisdom to take action. That's where it stops. And then you look at and analyze, okay, how did that work out for me? Is that serving me for my goals, or is that taking me backwards? If it's taking you backwards, you then circle back around. I know my identity. I'm making a decision, the choice to do this thing with wisdom, and then you take action, not built around shame because you should do it, because they said you should, because you're worried about what would happen if you didn't, fear, shame, fear, control, but instead you are choosing that this is my purpose, this is my calling, and I'm going to do that, and then it stops there. Not because they said, but because that's what you know you're supposed to do. And so what I want to encourage you with today is this. Eliminate the shame factors from your life. Say no to shame influencing you and your actions. If you're noticing that you're doing something just because they said you should, just because you feel you should, because so-and-so might get upset, or you're not doing something that you know you're called to do because you're worried or fearful about it, you're letting shame control your life. And so when you eliminate that and then you get clear with your beliefs about your identity, you can then choose the decisions that will influence the actions you take and attach wisdom to it. And where does wisdom come from? I believe wisdom comes from, in the Bible, being really clear and talking with God and communicating with God. For me, I get wisdom by talking with God. My wife, wise counsel that's around me, I say, hey, what do you think about this? Not because I want them to tell me what to do, but rather I need wisdom where I might lack it. And then when you ask God for wisdom, he'll tell you where to go. And that's how you will know your purpose, your destiny, and your calling, not based on shame, not based on guilt, which God does not influence with shame and guilt. No. For God so loved the world that he sent his son. And he created everybody with a destiny and with a purpose and with a calling. And so for you, ask for wisdom. And when you get very clear on that, you don't do things out of shame, out of guilt. It's really ugly. You do it because that's what you know you were made for. And when you get really clear on what you were made for, When you get clear on what you were made for, you can then walk out your destiny and your calling and your purpose, because that's why you were created. Have a good one, everybody, and we will talk soon. This is a good format. I just got to figure out how to turn off Facebook over here. The Facebook app is broken, so